Hey, wait!
Hey,
You know what? You gone and did it again. You're a magical genius, my friend.
I have my moments.
We have our topic, Dr. Evil, for tonight. Maybe because of the Venus retrograde, maybe because of the Mercury retrograde and the blood lunar eclipse and whatever the hell else is out in the stars. But we're trying to figure out what our topic is going to be tonight because we have a very exciting guest next week. Somebody I'm really eager to interview in this show who has made a lot of interesting contributions through to her YouTube channel. I'm proud to announce that next week we have the illustrious Dr. Angela Puka, PhD. And I love interviewing these PhDs because they take our understanding of occult topics to an academic level. However, today we're going to kind of take it back a notch, right?
Oh, yeah.
The old school, the old days where you're just this beginner, right? You don't know shit about the occult yet. You don't know what the lesser ritual of the hexagram is or the star ruby or the blue equinox. You don't speak the parlance. So when you enter the occult bookstore in the early 90s, late 80s, like Ancient Ways or the defunct Psychic Eye, there are books on magic. When you open them, like many of the books by Lon Duquette, your brain explodes because, like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Right?
There was a lot of times when the craft came out. I was working at Ancient Ways, and so we got whole groups of kids coming in, and we would have one of my favorite things was they would come in and they would be like, "Well, we don't need any of that beginner stuff like changing your eye color and all that." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "We want the advanced stuff."
Yeah.
So I'd go over and I'd pull down a copy of John Dee's True and Faithful, which, if you've ever seen it, it's just this massive leathery book.
Yep.
And it's got all the Elizabethan hand script on it with the long S's.
S and F's, yep.
Yes, I'd bring it down. I'd open it up in the middle, and he'd just look at it, and I'd watch his brain explode.
All of a sudden, he doesn't want to be a magician anymore, right?
Well, it was invariably, it was like a teenage boy and 2 or 3 giggling girls standing behind him.
Wearing all black.
Of course. But so they would give the whole "we are the weirdos, mister" kind of vibe.
So let's go back.
I'd sit there and I'd watch his brain boil. And then I'd be like, perhaps the young master would like something less advanced. Then I'd get him a copy of Modern Magic or something like that.
Or even Modern Magic they wouldn't appreciate. Or you would see them get so dejected because it's like, wait a minute, this isn't as easy as I thought it was. And then,
well, usually the way it came out was they were just like, well, what is this? And it's like, this is something to aspire to. Mm-hmm. This is something that you can get to when you have completely, when you've mastered like practical magic and you've worked with angels and demons and rising in the planes and etheric magic. This is the kind of thing that you can fully make use of then. You got to level up.
Because most of the time, right, either the noobs would flock to the yay old spell books, Crone's Book of Words, or the Modern Witchcraft spell book, or the Anna Riva stuff, all like this direct, let's do a spell, put the chicken with the egg and the tie, and next you have a spell, right? Or do you remember what's the other book these dumbasses would chase after? Do you recall? You know it. They think they're so powerful that I don't need to start with any of them. I need this book.
Well, I know that they always like the one from the movie where the pictures were moving.
Yeah, so and you're like that, or they want one particular book, which you and I have discussed since we first met, because they think that they're the shits and they can handle it. And what book is that?
Well, they would a lot of them would ask for the Necronomicon.
Yeah,
now at Ancient Ways now, last time I was there, they have the big leather bound copy of it up on the wall, and I was like, I kind of want that.
Just for the lulls. But it's so funny because back in
the thing is, it's workable magic.
It is. If you speak
the Simon Necronomicon is workable magic. It's just presented in a particular flavor.
If you ask
but I didn't even have Ancient Ways when I was a kid. I didn't have any bookstores. What's that?
You have to be able to speak the parlance in order for you to even have a chance with it. But the problem is
Yeah.
these kids back in the day, you know, again, this was pre-internet, this was pre-YouTube, this was pre-Reddit. Like everybody's piecemealing their magical knowledge. These more advanced books would be completely inaccessible to be used by new beginners. Like if you gave a beginner the Goetia, what the fuck is this? So they would end up flocking to the old school spell books, right? The easy kitchen magic.
See, when I was a wee tot, we didn't have bookstores because I lived out in the ass end of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So we had like we're up in the hills, you know, and so I had come across, where was it, in the National Enquirer, one of those scandal sheets. I had gotten a copy of it, and in the classifieds, there was an ad for, like, you know, real magical power right away for a catalog, and I was just like, oh, okay, hell yeah! So I wrote out for their catalog, and the crazy thing is, I still have it. I couldn't find it today, but I still have that catalog, and this was for international imports.
I heard of them.
And yeah, it's Indio now.
And I remember also you have to wait like weeks, if not months, for your book to finally arrive, right?
4 to 6 weeks, typically.
6 weeks. And that's funny because at the beginning, everybody, they say they want to learn magic, but in fact, what they do want to learn is spellcraft, right? And then I've noticed this for a lot of people. The beginning of their foray into the magical practice is to hoard as many spells as they can from as many sources. Hence, the old books from back in the day. So let's go through the list of usual suspects.
Well, the thing was, I had to hide my books when I was a kid. So I didn't have a lot of space to have, like, now I've got 7 bookcases, you know, filled all the way up with stacks on top. So I've got books now. But back in the day, I had to, like, hide stuff underneath, like, my dresser drawers, and, you know, so I really had to be conservative with where I kept things. But I also had one that I would write down my favorites. I had a regular book that I would write all my favorites in, and that was my main book. So even if I got rid of one of the other books, I had kept the favorite things out of it. And ultimately, you really only need 5 or 6 good spells.
Yeah, true.
Ultimately. But one of the first ones I ever got, and this was, it's an International Imports exclusive, and I think it's just, Anna Riva isn't a real person. I think it's just like a collection of people with a pen name. But I had this one.
I remember that one. Can you bring it closer to the camera so we can see it?
What?
Yeah, Secrets of Magical Seals.
Secrets of Magical Seals by Anna Riva. And the fun part of this was they just give you the they give you all the talismans. And yes, if you look closely, these are goetic sigils that she recommends just consecrating and carrying with you as a talisman, which I thought was hysterically fun. But there's all kinds of there's different seals. You have, like, from the 6th and 7th book of Moses, voodoo sigils, all kinds of, you know, and there's, oh yeah, never mind the rituals that go with those. Just use this for a talisman, and they work. They tend to cause more problems than they solve, but that was great. But because the thing is,
it's a gateway drug to further goetic study, right?
Well, yeah. The thing is, it gives you it's a beginner's entry into or beginner's foray into talisman magic, into consecrating talismans and sigils.
Yeah.
And so it's like sigil magic for dummies. But I don't recommend dummies use it.
Well, back then people didn't know any better because people wanted it more simplistic. Like, there was this one tiny book that used to go floating around in your local Waldens, and it was just like a witchcraft book, and it had an upside down pentagram, and it was just a bunch of it's a pocket book, and it was beige.
I have that one. It's black. It was Sarah Paulson was was the complete book of magic and witchcraft.
I think that's it. Yes, the complete book of
Yeah.
magic and witchcraft.
I have a whole shelf of just that's on. I have like part of the apprentice shelf with the books that I have apprentices use. Part of them are just really nostalgia for me because these are ones that I pulled some of my early spells from.
Mm-hmm.
But this was another one, Book of Spells by Mark de Pascal.
Mm-hmm.
This was what I had. This is what I read before I read Leland, who had traveled with the gypsies for a number of years. This person had also done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they traveled with modern gypsies because they talked about using things like freezers. But they had a bunch of like foot track magic, candle magic, that kind of thing. Really, really effective. But it wasn't as extensive as Leland's book on gypsy magic.
Now let's go for the big one. This, if you were a spell dabbler in the 90s, you had this book. Please show it, Wade. The Modern Witches Spell Book.
Absolutely. You know what I love about this book, especially? One of the things that I really like is I like people's first books and not the second.
Yeah, the second
one. And this is a perfect example. This is a perfect example because they write a book before they discover, morals and ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have in there, oh yeah, here's a spell to make a person your sex slave. Here's a spell to kill your boss, and all of these things in there are just, it's like, you can make your own decisions. Here's how to do these things you may want to do.
It was like the first UFCs where it was still no holds bar, my style versus your style, free flowing, right?
Oh, old school. If we're talking wrestling, or like public combat sports, old school wrestling.
Wrestling.
Back in the day, when they used to actually beat 8 colors of shit out of each other in the ring. And yeah, they had a little showmanship, the occasional, slice yourself. But it wasn't like the Undertaker comes out, puts his hands up, and all the lights flicker and all that goofy shit. No, these were just 2 human bears out there beating the ever-loving crap out of each other, and it was great.
True.
And that's what we got with these books.
Who it's been so many years. I lost my copy. Who wrote the Modern Witches Spell Book?
Sarah Liddon Morrison.
I got to give credit to her because she's probably somebody who got a lot of people started on Magic because that was available in the Crown bookstore, and the spells were doable. Like, they didn't really recommend too many crazy ingredients. It didn't lean towards any particular tradition. It didn't say, oh, this is Wicca. It was more like, do this for that result. So it was really like a working man's manual of magic, which I felt was really good. And, like from my days, of course, we were just talking about it earlier. When somebody starts their foray, especially in the 90s and in the 80s, where there was no information, no reviews, no YouTube channels, you're literally looking for a needle in a haystack with a blindfold at night. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, you're hoping to find something. And
I mean, going through that catalog, I would go through the catalog. It's like, here's an entry for a book. I don't know anything about this book. I can't pick it up and read it. And of course, the pitch is going to say, this is a great book. It's about blah, blah, blah. And it's amazing. And you're like, okay. So I'd have to order. And I had to order it to a friend's house because I couldn't order it to my house. And so I was just basically guessing.
And then it's like thanks to guys like Foolish Fish, now we know if a book's going to be good or not. Because like back then, this looks interesting. Let's buy it. And you send up, this is crap. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Nowadays it's interesting because students and aspirants to the occult have actually got it a lot easier than when we had it. Because like what we had to see, either you have an occult bookstore that you could locally go to and ask for recommendations, or you would go to your Crown books or your Walden books or during that time, I was already gone, was the Borders bookstore, and you manually look through the book and scan if there's anything you want in there. But the Modern Witches spell book was indeed one of them that proved to be something worthwhile. It was like, if this is the direction you want to go and you want practical magic, this is the book to do. But then one thing I didn't like about that era was the overconflation between magic and Wicca, where people were mixing up the two. That like, oh, I have to be Wiccan to practice magic. Now, nothing against Wicca, but not all magic is from Wicca. It's just a form of magic. It's a religious aspect of magic, but you don't need to be a Wiccan to practice magic. So like a certain publication firm that we don't want to mention so that we don't get a copyright or a violation of libel was printing out every fucking Wiccan book they can get their hands on. Like there was a flood of books all about Wicca, and it confused the market. So for some time, everybody thought that they needed to be Wiccan to practice magic.
Oh yeah, it was every flavor of, you know, what was the one? Was it Egyptian Wicca? I saw one. Every flavor of Wicca that you could imagine, and
which I don't think did the practice any justice. Okay, because Wicca on its own has its own respect to it, and if you're gonna overlap it with like Atlantean Wicca, Starseed Wicca, Shamanic Wicca, you're kind of diluting the essence of it. And going back to the main topic, though, it's really mutated because back in the days, I know a lot of people who would approach me in high school because they got a hands of one of those books and they fucked themselves up with it. Not a Wiccan book, but like a spell book. And he'd be like, "Hey, Rob, you're that Satanist guy, right? What do I do? I messed up this spell." And be like, Jesus Christ. I mean, one guy I'm going to give credit to who I think started addressing that problem, none other than Raymond Buckland. I mean, I got to give it. He kind of like made things more, if you're just talking about the spellcraft aspect, we're not talking yet about magic because we're going like full-blown magic, Crowley, we're talking rituals, Donald Michael Craig. The spellcraft aspect of it, the way he would write his books would be, okay, I don't understand like correspondences. What's the best way of doing this? Buckland was a good person who was like the median between the dabbling spellcrafter and the mage apprentice. Do you agree with this?
Oh, absolutely. You know who else was good with that?
Who?
Was Scott Cunningham.
Yeah, another one that if
he had like just a book of, okay, what type of stones to use. Well, here's all these types of stones. Here's what they're good for, and then we're going to go in depth on each one. And there's another book of just herbs to use, and here's what each thing is for, and here's how you use them. Those books are invaluable.
Now, I'm curious with your story, Wade. When did you make the jump from the Anariva spells to the actual magic, like Crowley, like a Duquette, like
ritual magic?
Huh?
Like ritual magic.
Yeah, ritual magic. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it was Anton LaVey first. Hang on. Anton LaVey first coined the idea of lesser and greater magic. Mm-hmm. And his idea of lesser magic, which the Temple of Set has evolved into lesser black magic specifically because, his idea of lesser magic was not magic per se, but it was magical. It was like the application of little known laws of physics and psychology. So things like hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, sleight of hand, all of these were considered lesser magic. Mm-hmm. And then greater magic was like your full-blown rituals. But in between was medial magic, or now it's medial black magic, which is just straight up spellcraft.
Yeah.
And neither one of those groups practices a lot of medial magic. They do a lot of ritual. So this would have been going from medial magic to greater magic. And I believe modern magic way back in the day was my first steps into doing ritual, because usually before that it's like, okay, want thing, do spell, get thing. It wasn't like, okay, this is a series of rituals that I'm doing for a specific evolution,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
It does. Does.
So I that would probably be late 80s that I started doing more ritual type magic. I mean, I had, oh wow, you know what? Back in the day, one of the books that I had ordered was the Golden Dawn, the the the
Yeah.
smaller, the big black
Yeah. The black
one.
best one.
Yeah. Well, there's the big red doorstop edition, which I
Yeah.
have the last one on acid free paper, so the thing is like a foot thick. But the I had the smaller black, the condensed one that was like 8 books in one.
Mm-hmm.
But that one was my first introduction to the LBRP,
Mm-hmm.
your lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and of course your hexagram and all the other stuff. But they recommended doing this one twice a day for a year,
Yeah.
and
Surely
I got
garden
to
spell.
say that's actually a good thing to do.
As a
Just
beginner,
in general.
yes, definitely. To ingrain it into your identity.
Well, it keeps your world soft
Mm-hmm.
and malleable, so that's a good thing.
But going back to the question I was going to ask is like, I'm sure that some viewers who are curious is they're probably going to ask, do you need to go into the ritual magic path, or can you just stay playing with spells? And what would the pros and cons be of either?
Well, if you think of it in terms of levels, like leveling up your game,
Mm-hmm.
you could spend your whole life just doing regular spells and getting the things that you want
Yeah.
and going about your life that way. Totally fine. I'd say probably 80 to 90% of people in magic using traditions are just doing magic to get things that they want.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like if you think of magic use like computer use. Most people use a computer because they need to write out a document or make a spreadsheet or they need to kill the Goblin King or whatever it is that they're doing. They have a computer that does that. They're not necessarily building supercomputers or writing their own code or building these huge networks. They're just using the computer to do a thing.
Some people use it just for Minesweeper and Solitaire.
There's that.
So
So yeah, I would say probably 80 to 90% of people using magic are just using it to do to get
shallow.
things in life that they want, which is fine.
It's fine. Yeah, yeah. I like to tell people that magic is subjective, but like my own take on it is anybody can learn boxing in a day. Okay. In one day, you could learn the 6 fundamental punches in a boxing match. Okay. But if you want to learn to punch and move like Mike Tyson, it's going to take a lot more than a day. It's going to take a lot more work. All right.
Yeah.
And if you ask me, that's the difference between somebody who's casting spells and somebody who's practicing magic. That if you're just casting spells, okay, you know what a jab is, you know what a hook is. But if you're practicing magic, you know how to move, you know how to fight, you know how to use these, and you know how to hurt people with it. So it's a matter of intensity. Because I like to tell people that, like, some people used to, especially when I lived in the province here, they'd always ask me, teach me a spell. And I would always tell them, well, why do you want me to teach you one of my spells? Why don't you create one of your spells instead? But actually, the initial level of people being taught a particular spell is kind of like their building block in making their own spells in the future. So there is the value of it, of knowing a particular spell from a particular tradition. Because I don't know if you noticed, a lot of the books we read, it's not really spells. They're actually, most of them are rituals or even ceremonies. Like when we're doing a goetic evocation, we are not casting a spell. We are actually summoning a spirit, a demon, to do something for us. Is it magic? Yes. Is it a spell? No. So
Right.
I tell people time and time again, especially those who learn magic from me, don't memorize 1,000 spells. Do not. Don't learn 1,000 spells. Don't write down 1,000 spells. Find a particular spell that you like, make it your own, and then supercharge it with other forms of magic. It's the same thing. Because the
Yeah.
jab I throw is the same jab Mike Tyson throws. But the difference is Mike Tyson has his lifetime of mastery in boxing that makes his jab legendary, and my jab's crap. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same jab. It's just he's thrown about 150,000 of them.
Exactly.
So that really, so like when you have, if you go back to, okay, need a spell to mess with the weather. Well, okay, here's this one that I've got that I've been using since I was a kid. I've thrown that particular jab 150,000 times. I'm good at it. And you can get, to the point where you've got a hurricane bearing down on your city. You're just like, yeah, I'm just going to kind of goose this off to the side here, which is fine. Yeah, it's a matter of just being experienced enough with it. So you don't have to have, like you're saying, you don't have to have 1,000 different spells when you have a small book that has the ones that work best for you.
Which makes me go to my next topic, which is of all those fringe spell books. We probably have hundreds of them. I mean, I've given most of mine away. What would you say is the most monumental? That like this one is really close to my heart. I'll always treasure this one spell book.
Oh, I would have to say, and it's not even so much that it's particularly useful. The one that has the most sentimental value to me was the Book of Spells by Mark de Pascal.
Mm-hmm. What was so special about it?
It was my first real spell book. And this is actually not the one that I had, but I managed to find the same edition of the one that I had. And it's got like, cool woodcuts and stuff in it and neat illustrations and, runes and stuff. But it was to ensure easy childbirth. Look how happy she is. See, there's all kinds of just neat stuff in it. And there's times that I look back and because my original one had like notes in the margin and everything. And I remember looking through it and being like, wow, here's magic to do with your coffee. Here's, magic to make love grow. Use an onion for some reason.
I have a question for you, Wade, if you don't mind me asking
you.
you.
The full worth, the biggest curse they have.
Which one?
I don't recommend using this on people.
What curse?
It's the most to turn love sour.
Oh, ouch!
All kinds of fun stuff.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question from a practitioner's level. When we were young and still white belts, we would be glued to a book like that, right? You're like, oh my god, all these new secrets and techniques in it. At your level now, coming across a book similar to that or written in the same way, how would you view a book like that if you saw it like that? I mean, like, would you be like, this is fascinating, or that this is junk? Like, what would your take be? Would you say, oh, that's new, that's information I can assimilate? Or would you be like, I like doing things my way? So, like, in other words, now, if I gifted you that book that you just showed me, how would you view it now at your level?
Honestly, I still use some of those.
Mm-hmm.
There was one of the first ones that I ever used out of that. It was for revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me a lot about revenge and especially justice. Because here's a quick tip. When you hear an activist or a witch talk about justice, turn around and walk away. Because most of the time, when people talk about justice, what they want is revenge.
True. So
if you cast for revenge, you'll get it. If you cast for justice, you'll get it. That's quotable. So anyway, but what I found was if you're going for justice, you have to look at every aspect of everything that's going on.
Amen.
Because you never know, like, shit, maybe I'm the bad guy here in the big picture. So when you pull up justice, now the thing is, justice does work really fast and really hard and really well, but you have to make absolute sure that you're the good guy.
You might just you might just end up shooting yourself in the foot, right?
Well, yeah, you're going to get justice.
Of course, the eyes of justice
But
are blind. Which brings me to my next question, Wade. I just love to
hang
ask
on. One other thing. What I noticed about the revenge spell that they used in there was you just take a piece of paper. It's like about 3 inches by 1 inch. You write their name on it in red ink, and you fold it in half twice, and you put it in the bottom drawer of something that has more than one drawer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a very, very good revenge spell, but it's got to be for revenge. You can't use it just to curse somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't strike the first blow with it. And I found this out through using this several dozen times. I realized that what it will do was it'll get like exact revenge. Like what happened to you will happen to them. And when it does, you need to undo the spell, or it starts piling up on you again.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So you got to watch the situation and make sure that you take. And I had managed to come across a small, like a jewelry box that had 2 drawers in it. So I had a specially dedicated box just for this. I wasn't using like my clothes dresser, but I found it's excellent for revenge, but you have to really stay on top of it, because that's a good way. If it's something that you can't notice, that you can't like follow the person's situation, you'll notice that after a couple of weeks, something bad will happen to you, and you're like, okay, he got his. I'm going to go ahead and undo the spell.
And is there a particular method that you recommend to undo this spell? Because you already told them how to do it.
No, just take it out, the thing, tear it up, burn it, whatever, get rid of it.
Okay, cool. Because like I like to share. For me, one monumental book, and you have a copy there, as in the practice of spellcraft. Instead of the complete treasury of witchcraft, there was the treasury of magic. It was a yellow book that my master let me borrow of hers, and of course the modern witch's spell book. But it's going to bring me to my next question. Of the spell books you've come across in your day, would you consider any of them dangerous, or was there one that like, hey man, nah, you don't want to be fucking with that one?
Well, I mean, Magick is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
They're all dangerous. In terms of, I mean, there's all of them that you could mess yourself up. You could mess yourself up with a love spell. You know, you get that person that you're like, okay, yeah, I've done my love spell, I've done the thing, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, what happens now? And you turn off your living room light to go to bed, and you see her standing outside your window, just kind of licking the glass, and you're like, oh, okay, this is kind of terrible. But I mean, you could mess yourself up with anything. You could say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this job, and you get the job, and then you suddenly realize, like, wait, this has become my whole life now. This job is a 24-hour thing, and I'm always on call, and I kind of hate it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that is really about getting what you want, and then you suddenly don't want what you got. Exactly. Some things are
classes.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things that are better left as a fantasy than a reality.
I totally agree with you on that one. And, you know, when it comes to these spellcrafts and stuff like that, one of the things that I wanted to share to people, especially those people out there, that if you have even the slightest bit of apprehension in you, don't do the spell, because you're working against yourself. That if it's either you're all in or you're not, because the last thing you want to do is do a spell, which is something you regret, and now you cannot undo it, or you're having trouble undoing something you created. Because I've seen spells work more than once, but I've also seen spells backfire horribly because there was apprehension, or you were, you know, like example, I know one person who was really obsessed with her boyfriend, and when they broke up, she forced a cord cutting. She did a spell to do a cord cutting, and it fucked her up so badly because deep down inside, she wasn't ready to heal that wound. She was still healing from it. You know what I mean? And the fact that she was forcing the cord cutting through ritual magic and spells was she was basically discharging herself from the hospital before doctor's clearance. And what happened was, for a year or more, she was still obsessed with this guy, even more than before when she did that ritual. So I tell people, when you're doing any kind of magic, you cannot be in conflict with yourself, because when doing magic, you don't want yourself as an enemy. If your whole entire being is not behind it, then it's not will. All right? It's want.
Yeah.
So, like, some people might say, okay, you know what? Me and my boyfriend broke up. I want to do this spell so I get over him. No, that's not what you want to do. You want to take the natural process and get over him naturally so that you could move on with your life. Because if you do it prematurely, it may have unsuspected results that may end up screwing you up in the end. Do you agree with this?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a process for this. You drink a lot, you sleep with some random people, you listen to sad music, and you fucking get over it.
Exactly.
There's a process. And if you try to shortcut that process, you're not really, it's like pulling a bad tooth. You can't just yank it out. You have to kind of, you got to tease it back. You got to, work the roots loose, and there's a way to do it, and then it heals.
Very true. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to ask before we go to the next logical topic is, when does a student know that they've already hit the tipping point with spells and they should already start considering learning ritual magic or ceremonial magic or third G or jumping into the more advanced stuff?
Well, it's kind of the same way that when you're done having jobs and you want to have a career.
Mm-hmm.
If you find a job, you're just like, man, I really like this, and I'm seeing the people that are coming in suits, and they go up and they have their own office, and I kind of want to be part of that life. So it's like, if you're dabbling around with your spells and you're walking around, you've got your black clothes and your silver chains on and your gaudy ass rings,
Mm-hmm.
and and then you see, like, you go to, say, a public gathering, and you see this group of people, and they're all in like the full robes, and with staves, and they're doing like the group rituals, and you're just like, oh, wait a minute, I kind of want to go big now.
Yeah.
So at some point you realize, like, okay, I'm going to need to find a community. I'm going to need to get with some people, because honestly, I was still kind of, I'd been working with ritual magic, but I hadn't been working with big ritual until I met Ebony.
Yeah.
And I started showing up at his classes at Ancient Ways. And I got to say, it was, because he would talk about like doing your ritual. And he's like, oh, yeah, so you do your opening, you have this, you have these other things. And then you do like the core part of your ritual. And then you kind of do all your closings. And I'm just like, hold up, what do you mean the core part of your ritual? And he sat down, he explained the whole thing. It's like, this is where you do what would normally be your spell, but it's your symbolic activity, with the wand, the cup, or the dagger on the disc, and all of these other symbolic actions. And he sat down and he described the whole thing, and I was just like, I am never leaving your side until I'm at least as good as you, because I got to study at the foot of the master, which was really something.
That's interesting too, because like a lot of people like to buy all these magical tools and just use them as decorations. But actually, boys and girls, there is actually practical use for all these things. And if you're content with just a candle and a string and some honey and some old school, hoodoo, witchcraft, spell stuff, if that's your jam, by all means. I'm not saying it doesn't work, okay? But if you want to use these techniques on steroids and make it even stronger, then that's when you might want to start considering ritual, because you basically, like, your rituals are all power-ups. Think about it. They're all power-ups or power downs, but they don't necessarily bring anything to you, but they are basically some stuff that either increases, decreases, or expands energy. Now, the question is this: what are you going to do with that energy when you have it? So if you're doing all these invocative rituals, like invocation of the pentagram, invocation of the hexagram, and then the first degree opening, and then the calling of the quarters, you're building up a shit ton of energy. And if you're just going to sit there and twiddle your thumbs, that's kind of like, no. But even the simplistic of spells, of like, what is mine shall thou be thine, you know what I mean? You could do a tiny spell with all that energy, and now that rinky-dink spell you read in a Disney book is now supercharged by a shit ton of ritual that you've done. You see what I mean? And that's the value of it. So if you want to learn how to take your spells and supercharge them, learn ritual. I mean, like me, I'm a Dragon Ball fan. Okay, I've loved Dragon Ball since I was in high school. And I tell people, like, for those of you who are into Dragon Ball, what does the Super Saiyan mode do? It doesn't do anything. You cannot kill somebody through the Super Saiyan state. It's a power-up. The attacks that Goku has used have been consistent since the very first Dragon Ball. The same attack he used then is the same attack he's using now. It's just plugged into so much fucking power that now the most simplistic of actions cause tremendous amounts of results. And of course, it requires discipline, study, practice. But the more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. And the better you get at it, the better results you have.
Well, it's not just that. It's when you level up, you get an increase in your power. There's also a commensurate increase in the amount of work you have to do, in your responsibilities, the restrictions on you. A lot of things with Thelema, when it's like, okay, I'm going to work towards finding my true will. You find that, and you're just like, okay, now I've got something to power up my magic, because I have this piece of knowledge that in this particular, if I can tie what I'm doing into my true will, it's going to have such a massive blast of power behind it. You're like, well, yeah, but you can only do that with that level of power if you can tie it into your true will.
True. And I think that's a completely separate segment that we're going to do, which like the lifestyle of the mage. Because
it is.
Like a lot
but that's where I was going with that, was leveling up does come with other restrictions.
Very true. Because like if you're content with just casting spells, listening to Hoodoo Delish on YouTube, which is a good source of casting spells, then that's good. But I will tell you, there will come an eventual tipping point where you're going to be more magically inclined, and there will be a particular price you have to pay for that. I mean, I like to say that the more force attuned you become, the more responsibility comes with it. And now you're no longer just using the force is using you.
Exactly.
And sometimes, take it from Wade and take it from me, we don't like the way the force uses us. It's just like, holy shit, but that is part of being part of something bigger. Like if you're some rinky-dink private, you're like the lowest class in the military, they may not really give that much of a damn about you, versus if you were like a 4-star general. Because now there's more power and stuff invested into you. And it's
then there's also that's another perfect example, is that by the time you become a 4-star general, that you are now like, there's so much there's so much politics that goes on with the role, that you're not even doing military stuff anymore. You're doing a lot of management, a lot of personnel work,
administrative
a lot of political nonsense, administrative stuff. You look at the Joint Chiefs of Staff. When's the last time this guy even picked up a gun?
True.
So you got to decide your own level of involvement here.
It's even something sometimes in the mundane things. Like I have guys in the military who had trouble because they wanted to get married to somebody they loved, and the military was like, we need to get clearance with this girl before we allow you to marry her. Because the thing is, the farther up you go, and I think it's the same thing with magic, the magic doesn't belong to you. You belong now to the magic.
Exactly.
And if you're going to date, like if you don't want outside forces and the matrix to fuck with your life, do not go up the ladder, because things are going to happen that you're going to say, shit, I thought I wanted this for me. Why can't I have it? And it's because the force, whatever you want to call it, the universe, has other plans for you. I mean, you and I have had this talk 1,000 times.
Oh, yeah. You get going with magic and you're like, oh, you know what? I need someone to be with me. I need someone that I can do magic with. And you're like, okay, here's a wife. You're like, okay. And you just sort of meet them and they're like, okay, Now you have the kids and the wife goes away. The kids are the ones that you're going to be working with. And you're like, wait, I kind of want a wife. Like, nope, no wife, just kids. And these things just sort of happen to you. Well, I mean, and it's a good thing, but it's part of this, grand design with your true will, that things just sort of happen in your life and they become a good thing, but it's not necessarily what you wanted.
True. Like, I like to tell people that when it comes to this level, you are the one thing you will have if you dedicate yourself to this practice is you will have higher purpose. You will have perspective. Like, you're living for something bigger than yourself, and in your own way, you're making an impact. That doesn't always mean you're going to be happy, but you're living for something bigger. And if you're ready for that responsibility, then I would tell you, by all means, jump into the practice of magic from spellcraft, get deep, talk to spirits, and you will feel connected. But it always has its payback, and it always has its trade-off. So with that being said, Wade, this was a fun episode, a trip down memory lane for all of us. Seeing that book, Modern Witches Spellbook, just brings back so many fucking memories. And with that being said, next week we have Dr. Angela Puka joining us here on Magick.tv. It's going to be really epic. So wait up for the announcement. And aside from that, also, the announcements are that the Magick.tv page should be up and running by April, I'm told. It's still being developed. So once that's good to go, the one on the internet, so we're going to have all of our content there. We're going to be uploading teasers of the upcoming Magick.tv compendium, the printed works of all the teachings of the first season, with me and Wade's annotations and notes of our experiences using these magics. And of course, there's TarotCon Summer Festival 2025 this June 21st here in Metro Manila, if you want to come by. And of course, TarotCon 2025 annually is at the end of the year in November. So guys, stay tuned. It's been a blast. See you all. Wade, don't go anywhere.